Bertrand Tavernier is an interesting director in that he's made tons of film, he's the ultimate cinephile, but you rarely hear anyone talk about him. I had never even heard of the guy until a number of years ago while I was wandering through the aisles of the Toronto Reference Film Library section, which I tend to do. I came across a gigantic book, I had no idea what it was, and I only picked it off the shelf because it was so massive. That book was Amis Américains, and it was a book that is a collection of interviews with Bertrand Tavernier. And I should point out that this is actually the paperback edition that was released a couple of years ago. The version that was on the shelf at the Toronto Reference Library was the hardback, which was double the size because they used an absolutely banana paper size. Now, this book was a collection of interviews that Bertrand had done when he was like a press attaché in France before he became a director, as well as people that he had met along the way, and he just got into deep interviews. And what I got right from the get-go wasn't just amazing interviews with Quentin Tarantino and Joe Dante. The Tarantino one I actually translated into English and you can find below in the link, but it was also a guy that was passionate about cinema and wanted to talk about all the stuff that people rarely did. He was obsessed with the Blacklist. He interviewed a bunch of screenwriters. And right there and then, just by the topics that they were talking about, I wanted to know more about this director. I like to say that Tavernier is kind of like Martin Scorsese. If Scorsese wasn't really interested in genre, but he still utilized all the same stylistic techniques. You can tell the Tavernier film because you have like rolling Steadicam shots. Often things are shot in fairly long wide with the camera very artfully finding stuff. And while Scorsese films would deal with stuff like gangsters or the violent life of Jesus Christ, Tavernier is more interested in the life of a painter who's detached from his family in films like A Sunday in the Country, or just jazz like in Round Midnight, which was just recently released by the Criterion Collection. And you watch that film and it's one that's just freewheeling, that gives you a sense of the music and the mood and the conflicted personalities that come and bring these stories to life. And speaking of Scorsese, he actually has a supporting role in Round Midnight as the lead character's American press agent. So you can tell that Tavernier and Scorsese were riding on the same wavelengths, but the difference was Tavernier never really had that big American breakthrough. He made an English language film with Death Watch, starring Harvey Keitel, speaking of Scorsese connections, but that one never really got through. The science fiction qualities of it didn't really seem up Tavernier's alley. And Tavernier was always a filmmaker as well, that a lot of his films almost seemed unavailable in the physical media format. They never had those big special editions, and while some of his films were released on DVD, like the excellent A Coup de Torchon, I actually don't know what the English title is, but it'll be appearing on the screen right now, which is an adaptation of a classic noir novel that Tavernier transposes to a completely different country to view the stories through a colonialist lens. Tavernier is a guy that his style is not just attractive, but he's also trying to approach these well-worn genres in ways that you would never expect. I should note, if I have a criticism of Tavernier, is that while he was the ultimate cinephile, he loved like B-movie westerns, the C-list directors, he himself could not deliver any film like that. All of his films are big, sprawling things, oftentimes more than 2 hours long, because he's so in love with the material. He's also a guy that has very particular senses of style when it comes to making movies. He's a guy that's not interested in plot. So a lot of his films are just seemingly random scenes put together to make an emotional impact by the end of the motion picture. He would work with screenwriters like Jean Orange, who was a big pre-French New Wave kind of studio cinema du papa guy, and utilize him because he thought he was a great writer. And he continued to work with these writers who had been discarded throughout his career when he was making all sorts of films. His first one, L'Horloger de Saint-Paul, or The Clockmaker of St. Paul, is such a simple story. And it's the perfect first film where you can feel this artist kind of figuring his way around the narrative, how to do something simple that doesn't have any big emotional theatrics and get it to work. But as he went on in his career, Tavernier would also pick subjects that were very sprawling, like the World War I film Captain Conan, or one of my favorites, Laissez-Passer, which is a film about the filmmaking industry during World War I, which features two people, or, actors playing those people, that Tavernier knew, like Jean Devèvre, who was an assistant director on films like Maurice Tourneur's the hand of the devil. And so it's all these little details, all this stuff that you don't usually see brought to the screen, and I love it. So if you get anything from this Tavernier video, is I want you to go explore his films. The ones that I would definitely recommend are the ones that are probably the most easily available in North America right now. Sunday in the Country, which is a very idyllic film, but is packed with emotion. And if you are in the UK, there was an amazing box set that was recently put out that was called The Essential Bertrand Tavernier, and has all of his big, major, important films. I'm not sure why there hasn't been an American box set. I assume it's probably because rights are very difficult. But Kino has been doing the heroic duty of putting out some of his films, including his first, The Clockmaker of St. Paul. And when available, they even got Tavernier to record commentary tracks, which he is excellent at. And if you see a Tavernier commentary track, I would highly recommend checking it out. I feel that seeing how there is a 1080p version of A Coup de Torchon, that there will probably be a Criterion release coming up unless Kino owns the rights, and that is definitely one to check out because it's just great noir in a setting you wouldn't expect, and it gets my highest recommendation. I actually considered doing like a video series of going through my favorite Tavernier films and kind of breaking them down more in detail. If that would interest you, mention it down that you love to watch that kind of stuff, because I still think he's a filmmaker. As the ultimate cinephile guy, he deserves more attention by cinephiles like you or me, and that he had such a sprawling career filled with just fascinating insights and a lot of the French films that I had never heard of. And he's introduced me to tons of stuff, not just American stuff. He kind of made it his mission later in life to talk about French movies, making a documentary called Journey Through French Cinema, as well as another one that I can never get it right because it has a very similar title, but it's also deep cut stuff. And both of those documentaries were English subtitles and released by Cohen. Go check those out, especially if you want to see French cinema that never ever gets talked about. And oh, one more thing. If you want to get into Tavernier's head, there is an amazing book series that was called Projections that was put out in the 90s. And each book, there's a diary, and one of them has Bertrand Tavernier's diary. And if you just want to know why I love the guy as much as I do, just read that diary. It's filled with great info, his love of movies, him discovering stuff, him talking to old filmmakers, him being pissed off by some critics at the time. And it's just a delight. So that's Projections. I think it's volume 2 because it's a book. You can find it if you go to places like Abe Books. Get into the Tavernier obsession like I do. Even if you don't speak French, there's so much material out there to get into and enjoy and recommend to other people like I'm doing right now. If you enjoyed this, please check out the Important Cinema Club, a weekly podcast I do with Will Sloan, where we talk about all sorts of cinema subjects. You can find the link below. See you in the next video.